The sound of industrial machinery at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday wasn't what most people expected in the pristine Willowbrook Estate subdivision, but Karen Pemberton wasn't most people. She stood in her backyard, arms crossed, watching with satisfaction as the excavator's massive bucket tore into the earth just 3 feet from her neighbor's existing pool. "Ma'am, you sure about this placement?" shouted Jake, the excavation foreman, over the diesel engine's roar. "That's awful close to the property line." Karen adjusted her rhinestone-studded reading glasses and consulted her clipboard with the authority of someone who'd never met a rule she couldn't weaponize. According to HOA Bylaw 14.7c, pools must be at least 15 feet from the rear property line. "I'm 16 feet back. Check your measurements." What she didn't mention was that her neighbor Tom's pool, the one that had been the neighborhood's crown jewel for 3 summers running, was only 14 feet, 8 inches from his rear line. A technicality she'd discovered during her midnight property survey with a laser measure and a flashlight. "But why right here?" Jake pressed, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You got a whole backyard." Karen's smile could have frozen champagne. "Because this is where I want it, and because Tom Morrison's pool parties end at 9:30 p.m. sharp from now on." The excavator lurched forward, and Karen felt a thrill of vindication. She'd endured 18 months of Tom's weekend gatherings, his laughter echoing across the fence, his friends' children shrieking with joy in crystal-clear water while she sat alone on her deck, seething. When he casually mentioned at the last HOA meeting that his pool was probably the best in the neighborhood, Karen had seen red. "Morning, Karen." Tom's voice carried over the fence, strained but attempting diplomacy. "Quite the project you've got going." Karen strode to the fence with the confidence of someone holding 4 aces. "Oh, good morning, Tom." "Yes, I'm putting in a pool. A better pool." "Better?" Tom's voice cracked slightly. "What do you mean, better?" "Larger, deeper, with a hot tub, and a waterfall feature." Karen counted off each specification on her manicured fingers. "Plus, I'm installing underwater speakers for my pool parties." The excavator's bucket scraped against something hard, probably the limestone shelf that ran through the neighborhood. Jake shut off the engine, and in the sudden silence, Karen could hear Tom's sharp intake of breath. "Karen, that's going to be expensive." $37,000, she replied, savoring each syllable. "But quality costs money, Tom. Unlike some people, I don't cut corners." She'd maxed out 2 credit cards and liquidated her emergency fund. But Tom didn't need to know that. What mattered was the look on his face, the dawning realization that his backyard kingdom was about to have competition. The excavator roared back to life, and Karen's phone buzzed with the first of what would become a flood of neighbor complaints. She ignored it. After all, she was the HOA president now, and she had work to do. 3 weeks later, Karen stood in her half-finished pool crater, water seeping through her designer rain boots, watching Inspector Martinez shake his head with professional disappointment. The morning had started perfectly. Her pool was ahead of schedule. Tom's parties had mysteriously stopped, and she'd already ordered custom pool furniture that cost more than most people's cars. "Mrs. Pemberton, we have a problem," Martinez said, consulting his tablet. "Your pool is 18 inches too close to the property line." Karen's blood turned to ice water. "That's impossible. I measured everything myself." "The survey markers were moved," Martinez explained, pointing to small flags dotting her yard. "Probably during the excavation. Happens more than you'd think. But the original survey shows your pool extends into the easement." The easement. The word hit Karen like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on Tom's pool measurements that she'd forgotten about the utility easement that ran along the back of all the properties. An easement that, according to HOA bylaws, was considered part of the property line calculation. "So what does that mean?" Karen asked, though she already knew the answer would destroy her. "It means you need to fill it in and start over, or apply for a variance from the city and your HOA. Karen's phone buzzed with a text from her contractor. "Foundation inspection failed. Need to talk ASAP." Then another from her pool company. "Heard about the inspection. Full payment still due regardless." She climbed out of the muddy crater and found Tom waiting by her back gate, no longer the defeated neighbor she'd terrorized for weeks. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the satisfaction in his eyes. "Heard you had some trouble with the inspection," he said. "Nothing I can't handle," Karen snapped, but her voice lacked its usual venom. "You know, when I built my pool, I had similar issues. The easement thing is tricky. Took me 3 months to get the variance approved." Tom's tone was almost conversational. "Of course, that was before you became HOA president. The rules were more flexible then." The implication hit Karen like a slap. As HOA president, she'd made it her mission to eliminate variances, to hold everyone to the letter of the law. She'd denied Mrs. Chen's request to extend her deck by 6 inches. She'd forced the Johnsons to remove their children's treehouse for being 2 feet too tall. She'd created a bureaucratic fortress around every HOA rule, and now she was trapped inside it. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," Tom continued. "After all, you're the one who always says rules are rules." That evening, Karen sat in her kitchen, surrounded by bills and violation notices. The pool company wanted $37,000. The excavation company wanted $8,000 for the extra work. Her homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover the foundation damage, and the HOA board meeting was tomorrow night, where she'd have to explain why their president was in violation of the very rules she'd spent months enforcing. Her phone rang. "Mrs. Pemberton. This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We've received some interesting information about HOA violations in your neighborhood." The camera crew arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, just as Karen had calculated. She stood beside her pool crater wearing her best concerned citizen expression, having spent the previous night crafting the perfect narrative. Sometimes the best defense was a strategic offense. "What we have here," Karen told reporter Jennifer Walsh, gesturing toward the muddy hole, "is a clear example of municipal incompetence. The city's survey markers were incorrectly placed, forcing me to halt construction on a pool that was perfectly compliant with all HOA regulations." Jennifer nodded sympathetically. "And this has cost you how much?" $45,000 so far. Money that could have gone to my daughter's college fund." Karen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though her daughter was actually 28 and lived in Seattle. "But this isn't about money. It's about holding our local government accountable." The story aired that evening, just 2 hours before the emergency HOA board meeting. Karen watched from her kitchen as her neighbors gathered in the community center, their faces grim. Her phone had been ringing all day. Board members, angry residents, and 3 different lawyers offering their services. She arrived at the meeting fashionably late, walking into a room thick with tension. Board member Patricia Hernandez was reading from a prepared statement about leadership accountability when Karen took her seat at the head table. "Before we continue," Karen interrupted, "I have an announcement." The room fell silent. Even Tom, sitting in the front row with his arms crossed, looked surprised. "Effective immediately, I'm proposing a comprehensive review of all HOA variance procedures. The outdated system that allowed previous violations to slip through needs complete overhaul." Karen's voice carried the authority of someone who'd never learned to admit defeat. "Additionally, I'm establishing a legal defense fund for residents who've been unfairly targeted by municipal surveying errors." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several neighbors who'd been ready to demand her resignation suddenly looked uncertain. "Furthermore," Karen continued, "I'm donating my pool construction budget to create a community pool area. Right here, in the common space behind the community center." The room erupted. Tom's mouth fell open. Patricia Hernandez dropped her prepared statement. Even Jennifer Walsh, who'd been recording from the back, looked stunned. "The construction company has agreed to redirect their equipment tomorrow morning," Karen announced over the chaos. "We'll have the finest community pool in the county completed by Labor Day." It was a lie, of course. She'd made no such arrangement with the construction company. But she'd learned something important over the past month. Audacity could be more powerful than accuracy, especially when you controlled the narrative. The board voted unanimously to support her proposal, and Karen walked out of the meeting to a standing ovation. Tom followed her to the parking lot, his expression unreadable. "That was impressive," he said finally. Completely insane, but impressive. Karen smiled, unlocking her car. You haven't seen anything yet, Tom. Wait until you see what I do with the tennis court. As she drove home, Karen's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sold a news story. We need to talk. City Planning Department. She deleted the message without reading it twice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she'd won. And if there was one thing Karen Pemberton knew how to do, it was turning victory into an even bigger battle.